The American Cancer Society reports that 2.8 million breast cancer survivors are here in the U.S., and we are so happy to invite one of those women here on the show today.
Hoda Kotb is co-host of the 4th hour of NBC's Today Show with Kathy Lee Gifford, of course.
Hi.
Hi, Hoda.
Hi, Hoda.
My dog is barking. I feel terrible.
And Hoda's dog obviously wants to join the instant response.
Little Blake
totally
is here.
Fine.
How exciting. Bonus guest.
Bonus guest, that's right. Now, for those of you who don't know, Hoda also happens to be a breast cancer survivor, and we are so happy to have her with us.
It's great to be here, you guys. Hoda. Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
And also joining us is Lindsay Avner. Lindsay tested positive for the breast cancer gene at the age of 22, and then she became the youngest patient in the U.S. to receive a preventative double mastectomy. Amazing. In 2007, she founded the nonprofit Bright Pink to spread awareness about risk reduction and early detection of breast and ovarian cancers in young women. So welcome, Lindsay. Really important work you're doing. Great to have you today.
Thank you so much.
So we're so glad you ladies joined us for this conversation. It's such an essential one to have. I know we like to focus on it in October. We should be focusing on it always. But Hoda, let me start with you. I had a question about one of the facts that I'd read, because in preparation for this conversation, I have to tell you, I called my doctor and made a mammogram appointment because I am 6 months overdue for no good reason. But I read in your book that you had said in February of 2007, your gynecologist had diagnosed you with a lump, but at 43, you said you had not actually ever had a mammogram. And I was wondering how that came to be.
You know, it's so weird. I don't know. I mean, I think I was one of those people that I ate apples and ran in Central Park and didn't have any history, and it never dawned on me. And just like life is, suddenly you're 40 or 41, you're not really even thinking about it. You're not thinking about certain benchmarks as huge moments. And I was actually doing a health show called Your Total Health. And I was telling people, like, why aren't you getting a mammogram? You don't even think about yourself. And I think you know how life is. You put yourself at kind of the bottom of the ladder. So I never did it. And so you know how jarring it was to actually go for the first time after a gynecologist finds a lump and realize that you're about to go down a scary path. So it was, I think it was just, I knew about it. I just decided I didn't think about it. I guess you get scared of things like that.
I think that's why conversations like this are so important, because so often we just think it happens to someone else, and it's not until we know someone or we have a family member or someone that has such a very visible profile is out there encouraging us to take steps to prevent cancer in our lives that we actually take initiative to get checked out. So thank you so much for sharing your story.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, I think we do what our mothers did, and I know that my mom hated getting mammograms, and like the only reason she would go is because she had a handsome gynecologist. Like literally, she would go maybe once every 7 years because she loved her gyno. And it's great that it's just, from my perspective, it's something I don't even think about because like my mom didn't do it. You know what I mean? So this is like a very important, awesome thing.
So, Lindsay, you actually, got a double mastectomy because you found out that you had the breast cancer gene, but I realized I didn't know until I looked it up how expensive it is to actually get the screening. It can be anywhere from $100 to a few $1,000s. So, we should know that lumps are one thing to look out for, but is there anything else that we should be more aware of with our bodies that could possibly be an indication that we need to go get checked out?
Well, you bring up a really great point around genetic testing. Angelina Jolie earlier this year brought this to the forefront, and it was so interesting because the work we do at Bright Pink every day all of a sudden was validated by such a superstar coming out with this news. The first, I think, a huge misconception is genetic testing is not for everyone. It's for people who have a strong family history, breast, ovarian cancer, and it is expensive, but for those who qualify, 90% of the time the testing is covered up to 90%. So I think there's a misconception because everyone's trying to run out and get the test when really we need to be thinking about those elements. And you bring up a good point about us knowing our bodies. So many women don't realize their breast tissue goes all the way up to their collarbone, into their breastbone. that they're really looking and they need to establish what their normal is so that they can notice if changes arise over time.
Lindsay, you had just mentioned if you're qualified. What would make you qualified? Is it the family history? I know you had said that was it your grandmother and your great-grandmother had passed away from breast cancer very close together?
Yeah, my grandmother and great-grandmother on my mom's side, so her mother and grandmother died 6 days apart at 39 and 58.
Wow.
Both from breast cancer. And my mom is close to 20-year breast and 19-year ovarian cancer survivor. She's amazing. Hoda and I actually were with her at a dinner a couple years ago through Self Magazine, and she's just an amazing woman. But when you ask what qualifies you, there's a whole criteria, and all this can be found on brightpink.org, but it's strong family history of breast cancer. We know there's a higher rate of this gene in Ashkenazi Jewish women, 1 out of every 40. Additionally, if there's any male breast cancer, those are the kinds of things families need to look for.
Hoda, one of the things that I thought was so powerful in all that you've written about this and talked about it is that there are, in a way, some empowering results that can come from surviving a situation like this, which is obviously, incredibly, incredibly painful and difficult. Can you talk about the fact that you had kept a journal, and that I love that you said you ended every entry with the word forward, I believe it was, to just kind of engage with the future?
Yeah. You don't realize how powerful a single word is, do you? How many times have I read the word and thought nothing? And I felt like, and I'm sure everyone who's been through this knows that feeling, you feel like you're stuck in the weeds. You feel like there's no way out. Like, how am I going to get to the next place? And all I could think of was, look forward. There's another day tomorrow. And I don't know if you can see it, but I wear a pink ring, and on it, to remind myself, it says forward, and I keep it on. And I have to tell you, when you go through something as scary as breast cancer, you do walk away with some weird lessons. I remember when I got through it and was over it, you get to that point where you're like, all of a sudden I had this weird epiphany. And my epiphany was, I had a 4-word epiphany, and it was, you can't scare me. And it was so crazy. It's like you wake up one morning and they were just about to start a new hour of the Today Show. And I remember I never asked for anything in my professional career. I always worked really hard, sat in the front row, they'll notice me if I work really hard. And all of a sudden I heard about this new hour of the Today Show, and I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do something I've never done in my life. I'm going to go ask for this thing, because I'm not afraid. What am I afraid of? And so I remember going into 30 Rock, going into the elevator bank that takes you all the way to 52, which is where all the big wigs sit. And I was going up to talk to Jeff Zucker, and I remember hitting 52, and I was so calm when I was riding up that elevator, because it seemed so nothing to ask for that. You know what I mean? In your life you think, what am I afraid of? And I remember I asked for it, and I had other producers, on kind of pulling for me. And then I ended up getting this job with Kathy Lee, and I thought, you know what, if I hadn't gotten sick, I promise you I wouldn't have had the guts. I promise you I never would have asked. I promise you I would have diligently worked on Dateline for many, many, many years and probably had a very nice life. But I never would have had the courage. So sometimes in life, when you have a scary thing that lands in your lap, whether it's breast cancer or divorce or you lose a loved one, something, whatever your something is, your cross to bear, you find a weird strength and a reserve inside you that you didn't know was there.
But even after you got that job, and thank you, by the way, all of our mornings would not be nearly as sparkling as they are, you didn't necessarily know then that you were ready to share your story. What changed your mind about actually trying to put it out there?
It's funny because I didn't want to be identified as the girl with breast cancer, because people look at you funny, when you have a diagnosis. They look at you and they go, oh my God. And I hate those eyes, and I know it's empathy and sympathy, but I hate that feeling. And I remember I just wanted to get over with it, and I wanted to go back to work. I didn't want to think about it anymore. And Matt Lauer called me, and he said, would you like to go on a Where in the World is Matt Lauer? I was like, okay. And I wasn't healed, because I had that tram flap surgery with all of the, It was the 8-hour long one, and the healing process takes a long time, but I just so wanted to go, so I went to Ireland, and I remember I was there, and I just didn't feel good, and I knew I traveled too soon. I just wanted to get on the plane and go home, and I thought, crap, I shouldn't have gone. And I actually I was sitting in my seat, I was about to put my earphones in just to cozy up and let the world wash away on the flight, and this guy next to me goes, how you doing? I go, hey. He goes, oh my God, you work with Katie. She's nice. I go, Katie's nice. How about Matt? Did they get along, or is it all, what's it like? I go, they like each other. Like, I was like, oh my God, of all the people I had to sit next to. But he was so likable, something about the guy. And I had on this compression sleeve on my arm, and he goes, what is that? I go, what's a compression sleeve? He goes, well, what's it for? And I said, oh, I had a procedure, so the doctor said when I fly I should wear this compression sleeve on my arm. He goes, well, what procedure did you have? I go, well, I had an operation, and the doctor said I should wear it. And he goes, what was the operation? I go, oh my God. I said, you know what? I said, I have breast cancer. I said, but I hope when you get off the plane you don't say, oh, I sat next to a girl with breast cancer. I said, I hope there's something else you think of. And he said, look, he said, breast cancer is part of you. He said, it's like going to college or getting married or working at NBC. He said, let me give you some advice and you can fall asleep. I said, okay. I never forget what he said. He looked at me and he said, don't hog your journey. It's not just for you.
Wow.
Wow.
He said, think of how many people you could have helped on the plane ride home. He said, you put your stuff deep in your pockets and you take it to your grave, or you help somebody, like choice A or choice B. And that's what, when you asked me why I said something, I wasn't going to until Ken Duane on the plane. I honestly was never going to say a word. And that guy changed my life. A complete stranger changed my life.
Wow. That's insane.
It's incredible.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
So, Lindsay, you obviously had chosen the path of advocacy and talking as much as you could right from the start. Why was that your decision?
Well, for me, it was, this is a disease that has stalked my family for so long. And when I was undergoing both the decision to have genetic testing and surgery, I was so struck by the lack of resources out there focused on prevention and early detection for young women. And I remember going into the surgery thinking, will I ever feel like myself? Will, implants ever feel normal? But what happens the first time my shirt comes off with a new guy I'm dating? Like, who's there to explain that? Mm-hmm. And it was really scary to feel as though I was so alone in that journey. And, it was, Hoda, you probably know these moments where you're like, you kind of plead with God, and you have these moments where you're like, if I can get through this, you feel this fierce responsibility to pay it forward and make it different and make it better. And I always say this is not a journey that I chose. It chose me, and yet I'm so fortunate and I feel so blessed to have the chance to pave the way for so many other young women.
And Lindsay, too, when I look at you, it's funny because I met this girl who was like, you're lit from inside, like you have this thing. And I was just talking at a breast cancer event in the Cayman Islands, and I still remember there was this young girl there, and she had breast cancer, and she didn't get the reconstruction because she had it once and it was an infection, and she decided just to let it go. And she's having a lot of difficulty now. She's a gorgeous girl. She looks like a model. Her husband looks like Stone Phillips. I mean, it's sick. And I was talking to her, and she had like kind of a sundress on, and you could tell that she only had one breast. And I have to tell you, certain people, when you look in their eyes and they look back at you and you hold their gaze, everything else falls away. Have you met those people? Like, you don't see a flaw.
Absolutely.
You know what? Yeah, you don't see it.
I think it's exactly what you were saying before, Hoda, the ability for this to put it all in perspective. Something really powerful for me was realizing that so many women are opting for breast surgery for cosmetic reasons. People are having breast reductions and lifts and implants, and helping to tilt things and say, okay, I might not be normal, but what is normal anyway? This is a new normal for me, and that was really embracing that. And like you're saying, whatever our situations are, whether it's that one breast, women who choose no reconstruction, implants or tram flaps or whatever it is, like, it's such a personal thing, but I so believe in what you're saying, Hoda. It's all about kind of what's driving you from the inside out.
Yeah.
So are there any ways that you think that we can use this conversation to reach younger women? Because I think that that's something that a lot of young women are kind of scared of, and I think that especially when you are in your 20s, you think you're invincible and that nothing's ever going to happen to you and you're never going to get sick. Do you have either of you have any advice or suggestions to ways to kind of have this conversation with younger women?
You know what's weird to me a little bit, and I thought this of my niece who's young and she's 6, and how kids who are growing up now, cancer isn't the scary thing it once was, because a lot of people know someone who's been through cancer and they're alive. And so, my boss said to me when I was diagnosed with breast cancer and I was so upset, he said, let me tell you something, I know a lot of women with breast cancer and they all have one thing in common. And I said, what's that? And he said, they're still here. So I think the weird thing is as we get better with diagnosing and finding it and stuff like that, it gets a little bit less scary because we all know somebody with it, you know what I mean? And it's not like, oh my God, everyone needs to rush to the doctor. And I think in a weird way that may be a little detrimental, because you think, oh well, then I get the lump out and let's move on, and we're right as rain. So sometimes I think it's a little bit, there are some bumps with the progress, because it gives you a false sense of like everything's just fine.
I agree, Hoda. I mean, part of what we always say is, October is fantastic because this is a moment when my grandma and great-grandma were about to die of these diseases. Neither one knew how sick the other one was, and yet all this awareness, I think, has given us this false sense that the same woman who's running a 5K or buying a pink product, she doesn't know how hard she needs to be pressing in, understanding her breast. She doesn't know her family history. So I just have to tell you, I mean, it's all about the action, because awareness is fine, but it's action that saves lives.
I also want to say they have these amazing genetic tests now that cost like $99, and like 23andMe, I know, is one of them. And I don't know, how far along these tests have gone now. They test for almost everything, genes for Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, but it's something to look into too, because it's getting very, very cheap now to get, for anyone to just get this test and see if possibly like they have higher odds for, breast cancer or any other, cancerous disease. So it's just, technology is just an amazing thing, that's all.
Yeah, it sure is.
Just for a takeaway, I know you guys have to get going soon, but since it is October, Hoda and Lindsay, if you could give people one piece of advice from everything that you've learned and gone through, what would it be?
I think for me, let's see, I feel like often you feel less than when you've had surgery and you've had reconstruction or you've had all this stuff. And I think back to that girl who I met in the Cayman Islands, and anybody who has that light inside them, and I can't even describe how many people I've met in my life who may be flawed, they may be overweight, they may have a mole, they may have a scar, but you see nothing but light in their eyes, and everything else falls away. And then you've met the beautiful girl who's got nothing here. Have you met them and you're like, you don't have that same feeling. There's something that these women have that makes them stronger, and I think the best thing we can do if you know someone with breast cancer is you've got to you just don't look at them with the sad eyes. I mean, I loved when people took great care of me and looked at me like I was, I have a long runway and I've got a long way to go. And I think that's part of it. And I encourage people to get tested because, look, I was 43 and that's not young, but it's not old. It's like, wow, you can't believe that you're having breast cancer at 43 years old. I thought that was an older person's disease. And I would just encourage people of that age to make sure that they get checked.
Great advice.
Well, thank you so much, Hoda, for joining us. You're such an inspiration.
Oh, it was fun.
And a big thank you to Lindsay as well. So we enjoyed having you to talk to us
about
your story.
Bye, kiddos.
Say hi to Blake.
I will. He'll be barking in a minute.
Bye.
Okay.